Hi everyone, my name is Valerie Molay. Welcome to the Climate Action Junior Cycle short course. This is a presentation of Unit 4, which is all about the value for climate action. So the focus of this unit is on understanding values that will guide us through climate action. And in a way, this unit is going to be a critical reflection journey where we will ponder on the question of social norms. It's like finding out what are the things actually in society that get us to act in a specific way that helps us build systems which builds the consequences that we have or which brings us to point A or point B. So the course, the unit is split into 6 weeks. The first week is all about social norm. So looking at the definition of social norm, looking at what are norms. And it also takes you through a journey of understanding what roles do norm play in the creation of system within our society. And then, and by unpacking that, we hope then to be able to understand what norms should we actually promote that can build the system which actually will bring us more to climate action. That's really the idea behind it. So you will see that week 1 start with an icebreaker. Like I said, this unit is very heavy on reflective, like a critical reflection. So please don't skip the icebreaker, because in order to do critical reflection, and there's going to be a lot of questions where you're going to have to ask your students and yourself, but what does that actually mean for me? Like, we all know why we shake hands, but why do we do it? So because it's gonna require us to answer these questions, both the teacher and the student. It is important to create some sort of connection, and I think that's what icebreakers do. So the icebreaker will allow you to particularly create the bond with your class or between themselves on relying on each other in answering these questions throughout the unit. So week 1, like I said, is going to be all about social norms. So I think the first activity requires you to, I think you can show the slides. And so these are the slides for this week, actually. So the first slide is about social norm, and it gives a sort of definition for the student to understand an unwritten rule that people in communities or group follow. Like some simple examples are there. For instance, saying please or thank you or waiting in line. Nobody really tells you this thing. You just sort of learn and you do it. And sometimes we don't ask ourselves the question, but these are the unwritten rules that we all play a part with. Please do give a moment to your student to give more examples and their understanding of social norm. Like, so this is a definition, but listen to them, give them the opportunity to reflect on actually what do they know about social norm and how do they understand them? How do they feel about them? Some may say, well, I don't really understand why we do this, but I just do it. And I think it's great that these exist. Some may be like, well, I find them very restrictive. You know what? So allow for those discussions to happen, because I think those different perspective and those discussion is exactly what brings out the co-creation of knowledge that is needed. So I think after a couple of minutes of allowing a discussion on social norm and definition, I think the next exercise is a video. So you will see that there's an experiment, a video with different groups of monkey with a ladder and a banana. You probably have come across this experiment before. So I think the beauty of this experiment is it's very nice. It's a nice example of how we build up these informal rules. So social norms tend to have a purpose. They don't come out out of nowhere. They probably at one point were useful. And like we will see in the video, is the first group, the reason why they started beating people never to go up the ladder is because every time that one of them climbed to reach to get the banana, they were basically hosed with water, cold water. So there was actually a purpose for stopping people, for stopping the different monkeys for taking the ladder. But as you go through, you will see that an entire group, or should I call it generation, of monkey that actually experience that interaction of we don't go up the ladders, we won't get wet. Therefore, anybody that tries, we stop them. And this is why we don't get up on the ladder, will all disappear. But the other groups that will come about never had experience the cold water, don't even know why they don't take up the ladder. They just never do. So it's exactly the same as social norm. At some point in our life, they may have served the purpose, but by not knowing exactly why we do or do not do what we do, we are unable to reevaluate whether it serves a purpose anymore. So that new group of monkey that never experienced the sprinkling water never are almost kind of cheated because they don't know that it will happen. And there is nothing to tell them that because it has happened in the past that it will happen now also to them. And so if they knew the reason why we don't get up the ladder is because there was some sort of, there was a reason behind it, they could test it to see if that still happened rather than just never doing it. So it's the same. So this is a good example of how certain norms that we've taken up on our society that at some point did serve us well, but and then we start questioning whether they still serve us well. So for example, I give a couple of example of norms, so these informal rules that govern our behavior, like raising our hand before asking a question. I guess it still serves us, right? Because we can speak over each other, and it allows us to still have some sort of order and being able to listen to each other. Because actually listening to one another and not talking over each other allows us to actually have some sort of order and also get things done. So there's a purpose for it. We know what it is, and it still serves us. But then there's also other social norms that are pretty harmful to society. Because at some point, it was useful, I guess, to some group to believe that men are stronger than women or better than women. But if we never question that, how can women ever have a chance to fully participate in society and do and use their ability if they always think they're less of? And we also know that that's not true anymore. So keeping a norm that men are stronger and better than women at all costs doesn't actually serve society, because it robs both men and women and the entire society the ability to actually achieve more than what we could achieve. The same goes for the economic growth key as a key element for human development. And here now we're starting to make the connection with the social norm and some of the elements that have built up the system that actually brought us to climate change. So this idea that economic growth is a key element for human development. Nobody can argue that economic growth at some point participated in the development of as an element of human development. However, is it the only element? Is it the priority at all costs? Should we have economic growth at all costs? At some point through the journey, we have forgotten and we have not reevaluated the focus or the purpose of economic growth. So nobody's saying that economic growth is bad or good, but we're saying, is it actually still serving the purpose to which we have allocated to it? And as we can tell with the destruction of our planet, of nature, resource, and exploitation of people, which we will talk about in week 2. We know that economic growth today, we know that a full economic growth agenda does not serve humanity, does not serve human development, and also even this idea that human development is a human development to the detriment of every other non-human, animals, plants, you name it. Or is it, and where did we get that understanding? That is also a norm, right? A norm to believe that humans are above on the pyramid, and the rest of creation, or the rest of nature are subordinate to human. Is that something that serves us? Yes or no? And why did we take such a view? Did it come out because we wanted to have a certain power dynamic so we can exploit better, more? Or to whose benefit is this keep going? Is this notion or norm is accepted or keep existing? And so if we do actually if we are in a world where we're recognizing that climate change is a problem, and some of these norms like economic growth, exploitation of people, exploitation of resources are all participating in the detriment of our planet and human development, human being, and we want something different that we call climate action. So what are some of the norms that we can actually put at the fore that can bring us to that? And I think that's where so after having explored what the definition is, seeing how it's developed, how it can be good and serving, and how it can be bad. So it shows the complexity. Social norms are not bad. They're just bad if we cannot reevaluate them, and if we keep them when they don't serve a purpose, or if they exist to oppress or reduce other groups, or other groups to basically rendering their power null. So we've done that journey, and now we're exploring norms and value on others, like in other groups in other society. So we have a good example of the Buddhists and nature, but also the Brahman law and nature. So we're looking at two different case studies, so the student can see something that is a little bit far away from Ireland, but also something that's very much relevant to Ireland. And I think with these two case studies, what you see is the social norms of the time or in this society are quite different than the current social norms that we have, and how they have impacted how the system works. So in the case of the Brehon Law, for example, the fact that there was a social norm that trees had a value. So therefore, what did they do? They created an entire system to basically protect it with real penalty and all of these elements. So this is what like the first week is all about. It's about understanding where social norm comes and the values, but also seeing how social norms in different societies, in different communities is different and can promote a protection of nature, which is something that we need to incorporate in order to get in climate action as such. We'll move on to our second week. I'm going to pause and come back with the presentation for week 2. Now we are on week 2, and week 2 is all about understanding and exploring global extractivism and the regeneration movement. So with this unit, there is two exercises, basically, 2 activities to allow the student to understand and unpack these 2 topics. There's the first is a video. So it's an extract from the Naomi Klein documentary, This Changes Everything. It is about a reaction of a community members in Greece, lamenting, basically giving out about the Canadian company corporation plan to expand their global mine. And so I think the community is really asking, are really trying to make a point about how extracting resources like gold seems to be much more important than the life of the people that are there in Greece, in this community, but also nature, landscape, biodiversity. It's almost kind of the idea that taking away from these communities seems to be like the last thing, or taking away from nature seems to be the last thing anybody's worried about, but making money and extracting resources. So there is a handout. I think the next slide sort of gives you guiding question. So after you watch the video with the student, these are some of the guiding questions to sort of get them to think about the situation. So sort of a nice reminder of the week one about norms and values, and especially the case studies and how there was different values that guided those society. So asking the question, what are the values actually? What do they think the norms and value are that are guiding the gold mine company? Is it like economic growth, making more money because that's how we move forward, or progress at all costs, progress for whom? Or is it that land is sacred and that we should care about it the same way that we care about our own life? Things like that. So these are just some of the guiding questions that can help you unpack and start this conversation. And I think there's also then a handout. So the main task of the week is a handout which sort of explain in detail what extractivism and regeneration is, as almost as an opposite to each other. Just the same way as we did in week one, where we talked about how norms is good, norms can be bad, and how bad norms can lead us to climate change and problems, inequalities in our society, but we can also have good norms that can lead us to better things. The same way here is almost think about this as a reaction to the norms. How are they then applied, and how do they manifest? So extractivism, for example, is one of those cases where, like I said, it's about taking natural resources, human resources, in a way that seriously damage and harms the planet and people in an unrevertible way. So it's very hard to get it back to a good state anymore. And then while regeneration is slightly different, it's all about taking care and renewing, bringing back to life, which is completely opposite. So we can be guided by a system where that just takes and takes and takes, or we can be guided by a system that understands that life is all about balance, and it doesn't necessarily mean that we cannot take. We can take while we don't always upset the balance that exists within nature. We almost kind of have to create this dance. So once again here, in terms of like the values that we need to carry out for climate action, the student gets to understand how the values and the social norms in our society, if we build them, or if we guide them, if we promote the right one, we can end up with a system that actually creates a balance between nature and people, and that is better for everyone, that doesn't create pockets of inequalities, that do not change or promote an oppressive system, and all of that at the same time. Like, when you hear a lot about climate change, you always hear that climate change is not just an environmental problem, it's a systemic problem. This is what is meant by that, understanding how the balance and the dance. And I think somewhere in the course, the student will explore more about the planetary boundary. And I think this is a nice way, a nice opening to that planetary boundary conversation, where how do we find the right balance where humans are developing and growing and bettering themselves, but nature is also being protected and also striving in its own way. How are we improving? We still have innovation and all of the things that people seem to think can only happen if we are destroying, and how also we then relate to one another. So we create less haves and have-nots. We create less of the 1% versus the 99, and all of that. How did they interplay? And how the only way to really get this balance is by understanding that it is possible to have the right values, the right norms that can bring us a result, such as using a regeneration like way of looking, or of going through or interaction with nature, rather than an extractivist nature. So week 2 is very much, it's very narrowly down to those two systems as such. So it's a real a nice reflection of the social norms and the value and what can come out of each of the system. And of course, which of the system is needed for us to actually embed in climate action is always the question that the students should keep in mind as they're progressing through the week. We'll move on then to week 3, which is about collective action. I think week 3 and week 4 is actually all about collective action. Yeah, I'll be back with that. We are now on week 3, which is all about collective action and versus individual action. So what we've done so far is, once again, this notion that we can bring together norms and values that can guide us towards a better world. And of course, like we have discovered, social norms are informal rules that governs community, society as a group. So it requires not one person, but a collective group. In order for us to achieve anything, we're going to need to work collectively. So this is where we start the conversation about climate action will require more than just one person to take action. Of course, one individual action is important, but collectively we can be stronger. So we're building up towards that. And how we're going to do that is by first, I think the first activity is a walk-in debate. So here on you have 2 slides with statement for individual action and collective action. What's beautiful about a walk-in debate style of activity is it allows the young person to give their opinion. First of all, it allows them to reflect and be like, oh, actually, I have to position myself somewhere. That narrows it down for them to be like, okay, if I have to put myself somewhere, where can I put myself on the spectrum, on this spectrum line? So it gives them a way to have a position, so to have an opinion, to have a place to stay. But also with a walking debate, because they're also hearing and seeing their peers along the line. And usually what you see is like, there's probably going to be a bit of gray. And that also allows an inquisitive moment where you ask yourself the question, oh, why are you over there? I wonder what perspective brought you there? And also listening then to each other. You can find people solidifying their position and being like, yep, after listening to everybody, I think I strongly believe that this is the place to be. Or someone can be like, oh, I never considered that. But now that you say it, I see it. Maybe I'm not actually that strong. Yeah, maybe I'm not totally against it. And I think that's the beauty of walking debate. And in order to start this knowledge co-creation about climate action and collective action that is going to be needed, we need to sort of pull out from the students themselves. What do they already know, or what do they already feel strongly in them about it? And I think these are some easy enough statements. You don't have to do them all. Pick one or two or three, depending on the time that you have. And I think actually for week 3, you only have the walking debate, so you can do them. You can do them all if you have a lot of time with your students. But with walking debate, what's really important to remember, it's as important to tease out why they are standing where they're standing, then actually allowing them also to just do the statement, and also allowing them to have a little bit of a back and forth, where and one person can challenge the other and be like, but have you considered this and stuff? And this can be done just by allowing people that are completely opposite or people that are in the middle to give an opinion of why. How did they make that decision to be in the middle? So you have a group, you have 6 statements from an individual action. This is to understand how much they care and how strongly do they feel about individual action and its importance, but also the same then, you actually have 7 for collective action. So there's like with walking debate and other statement, there really isn't anything right or wrong here. No one is ever going to be right or wrong about their position. But this is a good way of understanding the different shades of understanding that exists within our society. And it's just a truth. It is important to know that truthfully, everyone holds a different understanding. And the reasons are because, like, someone can say, well, I don't necessarily believe in collective action because, to be honest, think about how many times have I heard, like we're COP28 and they keep gathering, they keep talking, but nothing is happening. It's a fair statement, but you know why this person now has given up on collective action, because they've seen time and time it has failed in one particular aspect. So it's a little bit about that. It's about highlighting or enlightening the nuances rather than you're wrong or you're right, and individual action is not good and collective action is good. And so this will be also a nice preparation for week 4, which is going to be a little bit more practical as an activity for collective action. Yep. So in week 4, the topic is collective action and social movement. And the first activity is actually a game theory exercise. And you're probably wondering why game theory, especially with young students. The idea behind the game theory is it gives you, it doesn't just illustrate, it makes you a participant in understanding the difficulty of collective action. Collective action is something that we all want. We like to work in community. We're social animals, so therefore we like to work in community all the time. However, it's not easy, because to work together, we have to find a way where we can get everyone to actually agree or accept. And sometimes you have what we call free riders, people that know for sure that I'm not going to do anything, I'm not going to lose anything, and I'm going to take a back seat, but I'm still going to benefit. But you also have those that only are only thinking individually and want to first make sure they don't mind working where everybody gets something, but they need to make sure that they are in the driving seat, that they get a better outcome. So because of all of these reality, sometimes it's very hard to work collectively, even though everyone agrees that it actually might be useful. So this game theory exercise is a good one to really get the student to understand almost a little bit like what happens at the international level or at the national level about climate action and why sometimes we can't get anything done as such. So the activity requires you to do prepare from the beginning that this class might end 10 minutes early. So keep that in mind. And it is important to keep the promise. It is important not to break, to just do the exercise will not actually give them the reward or not the reward if they actually end up not getting the 10 minutes at the end. But it is important that if they do end up working together and manage to get the 10 minutes, that they actually really get it. Because I think it wires us, and even little things like activities like this in classroom can stay as a reminder of when collective action work. And that is what we need more of in society. So please don't break this if your student actually end up winning or getting this at the end. So the student have two options. Either they have two options. They get a piece of paper. Everyone get a piece of paper. The decision at the end is individual, but they can talk to each other in preparation for the decision. But no one can show the other what decision they actually end up making on the paper. That's important. They can have conversation, but at the end of the day, it is a closed ballot. So the first option is to choose to end the class, to finish 5 minutes early. No penalty, no one is going to ask the question. If you put 5 minutes on the paper, that's no problem. In 5 minutes, 5 minutes before the end of class, you can walk away. You won't miss anything, no restriction, no penalty will be given to you. However, you can also choose option 2 to gamble. Therefore, you write gamble on your paper. So the first option, you write 5 minutes if you want to take advantage of the 5 minutes. Or if you want to take the gambling option, you write gamble. And what happens with the gamble is for every person that writes gamble on their paper, let's say, for example, you are in a class of 30 and 10 decide to gamble and the rest don't. It means that once you collect the paper, you have a dice in your hand that you have to throw the number 5. So you have 10 shots possibility of getting the number 5. If you get the number 5 as a teacher, if you roll the dice and get the number 5 at the first round, everyone, including those that had chosen 5 minutes, can finish 10 minutes early. However, if you throw the dice 10 times and within those 10 times, you don't actually end up rolling a 5, all the people that chose 5 minutes still get to leave the class 5 minutes early, but those that chose to gamble get to stay in the room. And of course, the idea behind it is that actually the greater number, it's probability. It's a good time to introduce a little bit of probability in this exercise, is if they have conversation with each other and if they're able to convince one another to actually gamble, there is a high chance that the dice will be 5, because what are the chances that if you throw a dice 20 times that you won't get 5? So you increase your chances of actually getting the dice a 5 by having a greater number. However, the thing is, you will need to convince those that are free riders that might choose the 5 minutes and just leave it at that. And so whatever the outcome is, at the end, before you move on to the PowerPoint, do make sure to unpack with your student on asking them, what motivated your decision? How did you make your decision? And actually allow them to listen. Because some might say, well, I thought about it and I was like, well, it's safer to put 5 minutes than to put gamble, especially because I heard during the conversation that a lot more people were already willing to put gamble. If there was less people willing to put gamble, then maybe I would have put gamble, but I knew it was a safe bet to protect myself. Some may say, I definitely put gamble because I trusted that everyone, while we were having the discussion, said that they were going to do gamble, so I didn't think they were going to change their mind. So you're going to have all of these different varieties. Some might stand strong because they would be like, well, gambling was the right thing to do. It was the way to make sure that we all had the same outcome. So some people might come with that justice lens. So there's no right or wrong, once again, but it's a nice way of exploring the difficulty of a collective action. And I think the slides then brings to life this same game theory notion to what is happening with climate change, especially at the international level. So you can see here that addressing climate change, the climate crisis necessitates collective effort. And this needs to go beyond individual solution. So we're not saying that individual solutions are not needed, but it will need to go beyond that solution. So our efforts are small, but if collectively we come together, we might actually make a big decision. So currently, certain individual, or you can even expand that to nations, prioritize their personal gain over the collective well-being. For instance, the decision of the United States to withdraw from the Paris Agreement negotiation, or the reluctance for those profiting for the fossil fuel production to embrace renewable alternative. So when at COP28, there was a lot of conversation about phasing out or phasing down and all of these things about so the fossil fuel industry, why don't they want to just move to renewable? Well, they're thinking about their pockets. They're thinking about their livelihood. So they're thinking about their own profit and benefits. That is hard to let go, even though actually collectively, if we phase out, we might actually save the planet. So it's almost kind of like when you think about it like this. So this is a good example of similar to the game theory exercise that they just did, when people choose a short-term advantage of leaving 5 minutes, despite the fact that corporation in the present may have offered the possibility to extend time to 10 minutes for all involved. So the US withdrawing for the Paris Agreement, which they came back to, by the way. Similarly, we saw it in Kyoto. The Kyoto Agreement with Canada discovered that actually high greenhouse gas emission will actually melt down ice, particularly in the north, which would allow them to explore more petrol and stuff. They withdrew from the Kyoto Protocol and agreement also at that time, because at that time Canada was thinking, So you can think about it. Imagine if everyone stayed working collaboratively during Kyoto. Maybe we would be at a different place in terms of actually reaching, not going below the 1.5 than today. So what are other systems today that individually in our country, in our community, or at the international level, that we are prioritizing the short-term advantages over the long term of actually climate action that might save us all and the planet? So this is very much what how the game theory that they just did, which may have felt a little bit far away from climate action, really relates well with the question of climate action. And then, so there's a couple of then slides to talk about that collective power, and the collective power that climate action is going to need in order to move people from short-term benefit to long-term benefit, because short-term benefit will just cost us a lot more. And in order to actually get that collective power, we're going to need to build movement. So there's a couple of series of slides here explaining what a social movement is, what are their purpose, all of this to really hone down once again the idea that if collective action is what we need, and we know it's difficult because we just played the game and we figured out that it is hard, and we now understand how that same game plays at the international, national, and local level in terms of climate action. And now we need to create a new dynamic, and we need a movement, a collective power to really shift people's mind and focus people to that to create that collective power. And that can be a social movement. So understanding what a social movement is, what it requires, all of this is what's going to help us basically in promoting, participating in climate action, in the values that can bring about climate action. And we will now see in week 5, we'll look at 2 youth movements, 2 youth social movements for climate, and understand how, what are the principles under these movements that the students can understand and learn and also incorporate in their own project later. In week 5, the student get to learn about youth-led climate movements. It's almost kind of like a storyboard. So we talked about in week 4, we finished by talking about what is needed for collective action. We need social movement to kind of empower that. And now we're going to give them example of already existing social movement and youth one. So social movement, in week 4, there was a lot of explanation about the different type of social movement, but young people participate in social movement, and I guess it's more relevant to them as young people themselves wanting to take part in climate action, to know that others are already doing that. So this slide takes them on a journey. It's very much a story about both the Sunrise movement in the United States and the Future Generation project in Ireland. 2 different youth groups with 2 different ways and outcome on what, or should I say, 2 different ways that they want to impact the climate agenda or climate action. And but what's also nice is that these 2 groups can give you a great understanding in terms of the guiding principles. Once again, we go back to almost like all the way to the beginning on the social norms and value, and how we can make sure that we align our norms and values to the actions that we want to see, and how those norms and value can be turned into guiding principle for our social movement to make sure that the outcome is positively related to what we that is connected to the values that we want for change. So please do not forget, there is a text underneath each slide. There's more information. What is the importance of those information is it gives you a little bit more context of these groups, and it is important because later on the student will have to read the manifestos of these 2 groups and pick out the principles that is necessary, the guiding principles. What did they like? So once again, it's going to, this week 5 is almost a nice way of recalling. Week 5 is a nice way of recalling both the social norms, the values, conversation that they had at like almost week 1 and 2, and now putting it into practice, having seen how it doesn't work, how it works, and why it's needed, how we can get that collective power, and then now actually trying to pick out these tangible guiding principles that they can themselves can also include and incorporate in the way to which they want to participate in climate action. So after they learn about the different group, which is what these slides are, they do have this 2 student handout with both the Future Generation sort of manifesto and the Sunrise movement in the US group. Also, you divide your class in 2 and give them separate sheets and then bring them together. And really here, the emphasis is on what did they like? What did they see that was in common with both of these groups? What are these 2 groups emphasizing as big guiding principle? And what are the norms that are guiding that? So for example, you will see that in both the Sunrise movement and the Future Generation, in some way, learning and education is important. I think the Future Generation says something about education for climate stewardship. So it understands that in order for a social movement to work, we need to constantly learn and educate. And I think the Sunrise movement also emphasized something about learning. So it's a key principle. And why is that? You know, maybe the norm is that we always have to reflect. It is important to reevaluate ourselves all the time, and reevaluating situations, circumstances, by not reevaluating, by almost taking things for being the absolute truth, is part of the problem that brought us climate change. So maybe if we are constantly learning and reevaluating, we can actually make sure that we are constantly making sure that it is responding to the needs of the planet and people. Another point that both manifesto have, for example, is a strong stand on liberation of people and human rights. You know, so both are once again are putting at the forefront that people have to be free. We need to create a system that is not oppressive to not just to different groups of people. People have to find themselves, and everyone has to be equal. Liberation of people and human rights. And so you see that there's some similarity. And another point that I can mention is also speaking and being heard. You hear in the Sunrise, they talk about speaking to each other, but also to their community, which is also part of the learning. And in Future Generation is also about that. They talk about speaking and being heard, making sure that we're creating spaces for young people to be heard, not just to be given a platform to speak for nothing. Being heard is important. So all of that communication seems to be important. Why is that? What's the guiding principle? Why is that a guiding principle? What is the norm behind it? What is the value that people are trying to speak? So it really is about that, emphasizing that part of the exercise on the comparison. Why? What is the norm? What do you like about it? How do you think it's going to help or translate to a better climate action? And for yourself, how is that going to be a nice way for you to participate? I think if I'm heard, I think if I'm heard, and if I make sure that other people are heard, we can always make sure that we're not leaving anyone behind. So things like that, young people, the students can say, things like that are also some of the examples that you might be able to mention to them in order to allow them to comprehend if they're stuck. And of course, this then translates really well to week 6, which is going to be about their own statement. So now they're learned about the guiding principles of other youth movements, now they can think about their own ones and what can they keep throughout this 6 weeks. So week 6 is about the value statement. This week is about reflecting. And now we are in week 6, and week 6 is all about building the value statement of the class for climate action. So it's similar to the manifesto that we've seen other youth-led organization or movement that have. It's the thing that brings the guiding principle on how they would like to progress with climate action, or how would they like to participate in building up more and demanding more climate action in a fair way. So the suggestion would be to revisit some of the principles, guiding principle that the group liked, which was talked about in week 5. So revisit that with the class before actually jumping to this last activity. The reason why the activity, this last activity takes a form of a world cafe is because the unique element of a world cafe is the setup of when you have a lot to talk about, but you don't want a constant repeat, but you also want different perspective to be brought about. So having the class divided into 3 groups to answer the 3 major or main points for the statement, which will be about working together, addressing root cause of the climate crisis, but also what is the most important principle that we should include that is related to climate. So by dividing the classroom like that, you are giving the student the opportunity to delve a little deeper, because they're small, they can talk a little bit more amongst themselves. But also with World Cafe, you always have a host. So there is always one person that stays on the table as the person that summarizes and participates in 3 conversations on the same topic, while everybody else is moving around. And in this way, what the host is doing is making sure that the conversation doesn't necessarily repeat itself, but is built upon the conversation that we previously had. So there is 3 guiding questions in the teacher's activity that will allow the students or guide them to figuring out what would they like to have in their value statement. So some examples are giving in terms of like working together. It could be like, what are the principles or the values that we want to uphold in working together? So like team building or community building, they can say things like, we look out for one another. So we make sure that no one is left behind, and things like that. So things that shows that we listen to one another, or that all these elements that make sure that we're constantly working together, and that they're upholding to the principle of working together. But then there's also such as the part of the statement which needs to make sure that it's really addressing the root causes of climate crisis. So thinking back on week 3 when they were watching the documentary about extractivism versus regeneration, and what they had learned about versus systems, and how we can sometimes put profit profit before people and things like that. So in this case, their statement can include something simple as, we want to fight inequality, so therefore we're going to make sure that we put people before profit. So a simple statement, but that really shows that this group, while they're working on their climate action or participating in climate action, they will make sure that people are not, that profit is not put above people or planet. Or so they can even interpret that differently. They can be like, we want to make sure profit is not over nature or biodiversity, things like that. So those would be addressing root causes. So the overall, they can talk about environmental stewardship, when they can say that we want to create a sustainable planet, not just for people, but also we want to emphasize the need, or role as our role in environmental stewardship. Like, for example, what the Buddhist community had been practicing, or what was practiced through a legal framework with the Brehon Law Society. So this is pretty much the end of Unit 4. I hope this video was useful to understand the flow and why certain activity had been chosen in this method particularly, but also just the connection or the steps that brings us to this point about the young people, the students discovering or almost making a statement, a value statement for themselves as their guiding document to how they are going to proceed in participating as part of a movement for climate action. Thank you very much. And yeah, wishing you the best of luck.